I don't know about you, but I am so sick of everyone saying, well, Max Brosmer, he has to adjust to the FBS. He has to adjust. We're going to talk about why he'll be just fine and offensive breakouts on today's Locked On Golden Gophers.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. But in the offseason, we've been a little bit off. We've been more of a 3 days per week, kind of later in the week, but we are getting closer towards full season or getting ready towards the fall camp in August, and that's where we will kick it off back to 100% 5 days a week. So definitely be sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss any of that daily Gophers content moving forward. We're going to do breakdowns of every single Gophers opponent in depth. We're going to do breakdowns of every single position group room for the Minnesota Golden Gophers and more. You're not going to want to miss it. So definitely hit subscribe over on YouTube or follow along wherever you get your podcasts at Locked On Golden Gophers. Now today, we're going to talk about quarterback Max Brosmer because I want to get away from the doubt of the FCS, because there have been many FCS quarterbacks that have done well both at the FBS level and in the NFL. So it's time to erase that narrative. Now, on top of that, we're going to talk about offensive breakout players, impact breakout players for the 2024 season. We did defensive in our last show, so if you haven't caught that, be sure to go back and listen to that one for our 3 breakouts there. But then finally, we're going to talk about my players, my guys for the Gophers 2024 season. These are guys I'm putting a stamp on as possible contributors for this year, but I could be 1 year early on them before they make major impacts. So definitely sit back, relax, and enjoy the fun. But let's jump into Max Brosmer first, because Max Brosmer, it is time to stop stressing or stop hearing others stress that Max Brosmer is coming from the FCS. That fact shouldn't hinder him at all. There have been many quarterbacks that have done well from the FCS to a higher level of football, whether that be the FBS, whether that be the Power 5, whether that be the NFL. And so it's time to get rid of those old narratives. Are always saying just because someone is coming from a lower program doesn't mean that, or it means that they're going to take longer to transition, or it's a shot in the dark. It actually has found relatively good success when you've shown the elite production and the elite capabilities at that FCS level. Now, when we've seen FCS quarterbacks thrive, not only when they jump to the FBS at times, but also on the way to the NFL. If you look at the NFL right now, FCS quarterbacks that are in the NFL currently is Jimmy Garoppolo, Carson Wentz, Trey Lance, Joe Flacco, Josh Johnson, and Easton Stick. Now, these might not be the names that you're like, oh, lock them in the Canton, they're going Hall of Fame bound. But a lot of these guys were high draft picks, first round, second round type draft picks, or they have become consistent backups and dependable backups at the highest level of football. So it just goes to show you that the FCS players can still get it done. Jimmy Garoppolo has been to multiple Super Bowls. Now, people might say he shouldn't be your franchise quarterback, and that's fine. But he's held his own. He's ran the systems. He's done well, and he's done it at an elite clip to get himself to the NFL and become a starter and get paid and get to a Super Bowl. On top of that, you've got Carson Wentz, who before his injury looked like one of the best quarterbacks in football. Before his injury, he was on his way to an MVP, and in that season, his team ended up going to the Super Bowl. He could have led that helm. Nick Foles ended up finishing the helm for him, but Carson Wentz showed that he had all of the ability. Now, he might have gotten his own way off of the field, maybe some stubbornness, maybe some disagreeing personalities or what have you. Sounds like he wasn't the greatest locker room guy, but he's always had the talent, but he's also had the talent to throw interceptions. But at the same time, I believe he has more touchdowns than interceptions. if you look at his record, and I believe he has a winning football record when it comes to wins versus losses. So overall, Carson Wentz, even though he's now a backup, it has a very talented skill set and made it to the NFL. Trey Lance, we haven't really gotten a chance to see him, but he has gotten himself to be a first-round top 3 pick, and he showed flashes before the injuries. Joe Flacco has won a Super Bowl, and he just put together a historic season, comeback player of the year, I believe, with the Cleveland Browns, coming off of his couch back to the game and balling out for the Browns. Josh Johnson, we've seen him step up in games at times, and Easton Stick is a consistent backup for the Chargers. Now, also previous NFL players that have played at the FCS level: Steve McNair, Phil Simms, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Tony Romo, Rich Gannon, Kurt Warner, Josh McCown. There's another Super Bowl quarterback in that list for you. There's other consistent guys who are Pro Bowl type players. Now, that's a mixture of old and new. It's also a mixture of Super Bowl winners, MVP level play, some huge years, some journeymen. And additionally, we've seen the FCS to the FBS transfers have success recently as well. Players who have recently transferred up from the FCS to the FBS: Cam Ward. Cam Ward comes from Incarnate World, and he goes to Washington State, and he becomes a top 25 pass yards in the league, on top of being — actually, he was a top 8 in pass yards in the league and top 20 in passing touchdowns in the entire country. Shadur Sanders came up last year, became a top 25 player in pass yards and a top 15 player in passing touchdowns. And that was with one of the, if not the worst offensive line in the entire nation. And Shadur Sanders still found a way to translate, still found a way to read the field, still found a way to produce at an effective and elite clip. And he did that at the FCS, and he has done that now at the FBS. And they're hoping that he can take even another step forward, become a top draft pick, become a Heisman candidate if his O-line can put it together. Bailey Zappi became the #1 player in the country in pass yards and pass touchdowns. I believe he still holds the record for passing yards in a single season. He passed Joe Burrow's numbers. Bailey Zappi balled out. Austin Reed came from D2, not FCS, D2. Became a top 3 in passing touchdowns and the #1 in passing yards in the country. Tony Muskett transfers up to Virginia. Now, he struggled with injuries, but in 4 full games, he had 1,000 yards almost and 6 touchdowns passing. He was Virginia's starter prior to the injuries, and he came back and started a bit after them. But what I'm saying is we have seen it translate from the FCS to the FBS. It isn't like a rarity nowadays. If you produce at a high clip, an elite clip, which Max Brosmer had done, he was the 2nd finalist in the Walter Payton, basically the Heisman of the FCS. He can get it done. Now, I'm not saying Max is going to light the world on fire. I'm not saying he's going to be the #1 passer or even top 25 at that. I'm just saying we've seen it done. The Minnesota offense likely won't pass enough to give him the chance to get there, but the ability is there. Now, that being said, Max Brosmer is experienced. Max Brosmer makes smart plays. He will take the check down. He takes care of the ball. He can hit the layup throws, and he can hit the big throw. Now, all of this is also in the brief times that we've been able to see him in the spring, in the media sessions, in the open practices, and what have you. I saw the evolution of him getting adjusted to the speed of Big Ten, of him making the smarter reads, of him getting up to the level of play of what he can get away with, what he can't, where he can place it, how much bigger defenders are, and how they can bat the ball down at the line of scrimmage. He was feeling it out, and it got progressively better as the spring sessions went on, and we got to see him more. So that's on the field. But then even off the field, oh, and by the way, in that spring session, he did all that without his #1 option in Daniel Jackson, which should only make life easier for him. But even off the field, his leadership has been off the charts extremely quickly. He was voted a team captain by his teammates in just a matter of months, coming in, not knowing anybody, coming in during the bowl game prep, helping out his team where he could. And then all of a sudden, when he can get into things in January, his teammates end up voting him a captain by the end of January, early beginning of February. So he's a team captain. He had pro day experience with the alumni, and he got together with them ahead of time, throwing with Brevin Spanford, Chris Bell, Corey Crooms, and talking them through and showing his leadership on the field on that pro day and directing kind of how do they want things run and talking with the scouts and things like that, talking with Josh McCown to learn more about the headsets and putting himself into an advantageous position for next year. And then on top of that, the offensive coordinator, Greg Harbaugh, he has talked about the challenge that Max Brosmer challenges him, and Max Brosmer pushes him to be better. But on top of that, Max Brosmer sends him clips, sends him ideas of his own to incorporate, or how do they think about this, or is this something they could do? He's constantly thinking about football. And on top of that, he's setting up trips to Georgia in the beginning, before the spring session and after the spring session, with his receivers, with his fellow quarterbacks, to get them in the work, to get them going, to building chemistry, to taking that extra step to build things quicker and help elevate for this one season he will have. This is a guy who has worked alongside Jalen Hurts, CJ Stroud, Justin Fields, among others. Now, those are some of the hardest working guys in the NFL. And on top of that, his quarterback coaches who work with them and work with him have talked about and mentioned how he absolutely holds his own and he can be an NFL player. Standing next to those guys, he doesn't look lost. He doesn't look out of place. He looks like he can fit in seamlessly. So let's retire the worry narratives. Let's not act like he can't be a top quarterback in the Big Ten, because he absolutely can. And he has what it takes to make this a special year for the Gophers. So we're going to tap in. We're going to retire the FCS worries, and we're going to cheer on Max Brosmer this upcoming season. Now, we're going to move into offensive player impact breakouts. 3 players I think are going to have a massive season for the offense. I'm going to dive into that coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience is the winning formula to not only championships, but also what helps keep your ride or die, your vehicle, alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. They've got everything you need from over 122 million parts to keep your vehicle alive. You'll always find exactly what you're looking for, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. I'm getting ready to soup up my truck a little bit, and I am definitely heading on over to eBay Motors, because they have everything you need, whether you're into speed, power, or style. They have you covered. So go to eBay Motors, and with the eBay Motors guaranteed fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or your money back, because you're burning rubber, not cash, with eBay Motors. So all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP with eBay Motors. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply, and the eBay guaranteed fit is for U.S. customers only. All right, Gophers fans, last show we talked about 3 impact defensive players that I think are going to take the next step in this 2024 season. Today, we're going to talk about 3 impact breakout offensive players that I think are going to have a massive impact for the 2024 season. Now, I did honorable mentions on the defense, so I'm going to do it on the offense as well. I put Daniel Jackson in the honorable mentions because he has been growing steadily each and every season, and I do believe he could have his best season yet with some more steady quarterback play. But that being said, I don't see that as a breakout. I just see that as adding on to his success. So I couldn't put him in the actual impact breakouts, because he's always had an impact, especially these last 2 seasons. Max Brosmer I put into that conversation, but I feel like it was too easy. On top of, I think that the expectations are there that it's not really a breakout of sorts, but people are expecting him to do really well from jump with his only year of eligibility and the production that he had at the FCS. And then I also put honorable mentions of C.A. Bangura and Elijah Spencer. I think both of them will be heavily involved in the offense, but I don't know how much touches, how much looks, how much targets, or what have you they will receive. So in the end, I do believe they could end up as the top 3, but I just don't have them as my top 3 for this segment. Now, my 3 names that I'm going to dive into. One is a wide receiver. The first one I'll bring up is Le'Meke Brockington. Now, this is a lot more projecting than it is based on numbers, especially from last year, because he suffered an injury last season. But we saw the potential in 2022 where he had over 200 yards. He had a major touchdown against Wisconsin, one of the biggest touchdowns of the season, to help put that game away. But Le'Meke Brockington he's been taking strides and steps, and you can see it very clearly in these spring practices, in my opinion. Now, a year ago at this point in time, when we were entering the spring sessions, I was watching Daniel Jackson. I thought Daniel Jackson did really well to close out his 22 season. And then watching him in that spring session, I was like, this dude just seems to be on another level, a different sense of confidence, a different sense of swagger. He's coming down with every catch I see put up his way in the spring sessions. He looks special. And I said, I think he's going to be a breakout for this next season. He's going to be the number one receiver. He's going to lead the team in receiving yards and receiving touchdowns and what have you. And he did that. He did that and then some. I think Le'Meke Brockington has had a very similar type of spring. It seems like he's taking strides. He's more confident. He seems like he's faster. He's stronger. He's always in the right place. He has a good connection with Max Brosmer already. And I think Le'Meke Brockington is going to put himself into the conversation to be a consistent wide receiver and find a good, healthy amount of production in this upcoming season. Now, maybe that's 500 yards and a few touchdowns, maybe 4 to 5 touchdowns. That's still a really good season for someone who is coming off an injury and only had 75 yards last season. So Le'Meke Brockington is a player I do truly believe is going to take that next step and put himself into a confident position to be one of the leading receivers in this room. Now, my second impact breakout player is Greg Johnson. Greg Johnson started out the year last year with the expectations or the talk from the coaches that he wouldn't necessarily be a redshirt. He could find himself on the field. That's how much he came in ready. He came in strong, and he had impressed his coaches from day one as a true freshman in the spring early enrollee sessions. Well, he did just that. He didn't end up redshirting. He played in a number of games last season. I believe he got 1 or 2 starts. And so overall, Greg Johnson was a player that was building his confidence, but he was getting his feet wet. Now, he was making some learning mistakes. If you look at his PFF grades, there were moments where they're really good and there were moments where they were really bad. Now, I think PFF is a little bit hit or miss on some of their blocking grades when it comes to the consistency that they have across the board, but I digress. Greg Johnson is stepping into a full-time starter role this season. It looks like he's going to be the center for the Gophers from what we saw all spring, where he took all of his snaps there. And I think that he looks more and more confident. He looks more and more, it looks like he's progressing a lot. When we talked to the coaches in the spring sessions, they talked about how he is just absorbing everything like a sponge. And it seems like he is ready to do whatever it takes for his team to win. Now, does that mean he's going to be the center for the next 3 years? Maybe not. I think his versatility helps make him one of the best foundational pieces on this offensive line, because if there's somebody who can play the center position more effectively next season, you can move Greg to one of the guard positions. I think he's more naturally at one of the guard positions. If he absolutely dominates at center this year, then you can help plug other players around him. He could even play tackle if he had to, and that versatility will only help him in his pro aspirations. But I think this year is where we get the first feel of those pro aspirations could be real. He could play at a high quality level, and he could be one of the best offensive linemen in this entire room. So I think Greg Johnson's going to take a massive step this year, be a very consistent player, fix up and clean up the small little mistakes he made as a true freshman, and be ready to go in his second season. And my final player for the impact breakouts, it seems like it's a little too easy to do. I almost didn't want to do it because it just seems too chalk, but I'm putting Darius Taylor because he had an injured season last year. Now, we've talked about time and time again on this show that Darius Taylor's numbers, especially when it comes to rushing yardage numbers, were off the charts. He led the entire country in rush yards per game, but he only got to play in 6 games. In one of those games, he only got 1 carry for 3 yards. If you take that game out, his rushing yards per game jumps by almost 25 yards per game. That is a huge leap. Now, even if his production comes back some, he still will be at the top tier of that echelon of rushing yards per game. Even if his thing came back about 25 to 30 yards per game, he would still be in that top quality of running backs. So that's how special this kid is. And on top of that, I think he's going to be ready. I think his body's going to be ready. I think mentally he's going to be ready. I think overall he knows what it takes to prepare and what to expect heading into the season now. Before, he was an early enrollee true freshman who had never played at this level, so he was still feeling it out. And that's part of the reason Fleck didn't give him as many opportunities in that Nebraska game besides the 1 carry for 3 yards, because he didn't know what it was going to be in a nighttime, primetime, Thursday night game against Nebraska on Fox. You don't know what you're going to get from a true freshman at that point. Now, the next game, when it wasn't as bright of lights and it was the opportunities to be take a little bit more shots with things, and it was against an opponent that you think you should steadily have, you saw him absolutely dominate. And from then on, the trust was there. this year, the trust is going to be there right away. The health is hopefully going to be there. And on top of that, he's going to be stronger. He's going to be faster. He's going to have the game slow down for him a bit. And that can make Darius Taylor one of the best, if not the best running back in the Big Ten and potentially in the country. So Darius Taylor is going to have an impact breakout season because he wasn't able to fill this entire season last year. So those are my impact players. Now, the final things I'm going to talk about on today's show is my Gopher players, the people that I'm putting in my guys list that could step up and find themselves into roles this year, younger players that haven't really gotten to play, but maybe I'm a year early on them before they enter a starter type position, an impact breakout type position, or what have you. We're going to talk about who those players are coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at Gametime, because Gametime is an authorized ticket marketplace for Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. And on top of that, prices on Gametime app actually go down as you get closer to the first pitch. So definitely give them a look, because they have killer last minute deals, all in prices, view from your seat, and they have the lowest price guarantees. So Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets for the MLB. Same thing for the WNBA. If you're not ready for basketball to be done, well, luckily it's not. And the WNBA is in full swing. The Lynx are absolutely balling out. Hopefully Nafisa Collier's injury from yesterday isn't too serious, and she will be able to keep on progressing. She is in the MVP race right now. So definitely tap in with Gametime, because like I said, they can save you up to 60% off of buying last minute tickets for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, you name it. They've got you over at Gametime. And on top of that, you can see a panoramic view of your seat prior to you buying a ticket. And my favorite feature by far is definitely the all-in pricing. You toggle that feature and you see your total up front. You don't have to worry about the hidden fees or surprise fees at checkout. You can see and know what you're buying from the jump. So take the guesswork out of buying for MLB tickets with Gametime. Download Gametime today, create an account, and use promo code Locked On College. That's LOCKOEDON college for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's Locked On College. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off your first order. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Gophers fans, we're wrapping today's show up by talking about my Gophers players that I am putting in my guys, the stamp on them for this season of 2024, that I think they could be contributors. They could be players that are getting ready to take on a bigger role this year and then potentially be starters in the next season. But I could be a year early on them when it comes to major impact. Now, none of these names will have been in the breakout session that we just talked about, or any of the full-time starters that we've seen for the last year or two now. These are all going to be names that are maybe haven't seen any snaps or consistent snaps or red shirt or what have you. Now, once again, we're going to do 3 on the offense, 3 on the defense. You'll find some consistency from me on these names, because these are some names that I've really been talking about this offseason, or maybe even last offseason, that haven't necessarily gotten the chance to play quite yet. They've impressed me, they've intrigued me, but they're relatively younger and haven't got their shot. Now, number 1 on my list right now is Pierce Walsh. Pierce Walsh is someone that really impressed me this spring, a tight end for the Gophers. Last year, he was a true freshman, ended up redshirting. I don't think he saw any snaps on the field whatsoever. But we come into this spring session and I'm like, man, this dude just keeps showing up. He's running with the 1s, he's running with the 2s. And then all of a sudden, the more that spring goes on, the more you see him getting reps with the 1s, the more you see him building. But his connection with not only Drake Lindsay, but also with Max Brosmer was very impressive. His knack for the ball, his soft hands to catch the ball, all of this as a redshirt freshman tight end. But he also looks like he gained a healthy amount of weight, got stronger, looks bigger. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see him push for a healthy role in this tight end room. Now, you've got 2 seniors back. You've got Jamison Gears. You've got Nick Keller. Both of them, Jamison Gears has been waiting for his turn behind Brevin Spanford. Nick Keller's been involved for the past couple seasons now. Those 2 will probably still see the starter snaps as we head into the season, but I do think Pierce Walsh can carve out a role. And as the season goes later on, I do think we could see him on the field more and more and see him become that consistent, sneaky, maybe 3rd or 4th option in the receiving game that the Gophers could desperately use. So Pierce Walsh is definitely a name high up on my list. Now, number 2 for me is Zaquan Bryant. Now, in limited playing time last year, he held his own and he flashed potential. If you look at PFF, they credited him as being targeted 6 times, and he only allowed 2 receptions for a total of 19 yards and limited the yards after catch to only 4 yards. He also had the opposing NFL quarterback rating, or the opposing quarterbacks with the NFL rating. They take a look at it and they see how you would hold up in the NFL rating if you were targeted as a cornerback. His was a 43.1, which was only beaten last season by like Tyler Nubin and 1 or 2 others that were like consistently starting often. Zaquan Bryant showed he can hold his own. He can be that guy that can step up into a bigger role and hopefully be more of a lockdown, but also he lays huge hits on players. And we saw that in his tape coming out of high school, but you also saw it on the field in his limited snaps last year. You look to the bowl game and you're talking about Fannin Jr., who was one of the best tight ends in the country, one of the better tight ends in the entire country. And he comes across on a third down, critical third down. They're moving down the field. He catches the ball. Zaquan Bryant pops the ball out, gets a pass breakup, and it was a huge play to help get the Gophers off the field. He also prevented a touchdown in the scoring zone for Bowling Green in that bowl game as well. So Zaquan Bryant, I think he's going to step up. Maybe he's the 3rd cornerback, 4th cornerback in this room right now behind Justin Wally and behind the transfer, it seems like right now. But he could be that next man up. And I think he will see time in the rotation, time on the field. And I think he's going to impress in that time on the field, so much so that I think he could not only work himself into more consistent snaps this year, but he could be a starter in Justin Wally's place or Ethan Robinson's place next year, as both won't be on the team anymore. So Zaquan Bryant is a key piece, and I think he is going to be a guy that is a starter in 25, but finds his first real time this upcoming season. Now, my number 3 player on this list is Jackson Howard, coming from LSU, coming back home to Minnesota, and I think he's going to be ready. Now, he might be that second guy to fill behind Jaw Joyner's slot. Jaw Joyner is clearly going to be the starter, but we rotate defensive linemen so consistently. You usually have about 8 deep. You have 2 at each position at least, and they're constantly rotating, keeping fresh legs so you can get after the quarterback. Well, I think this new defensive coordinator and Coach Heatherman is really going to want to get after the quarterback, really want to put the pressure on, really want to blitz, really want to get after it. That means more time for your Jackson Howard, more time for your guys behind Jaw Joyner and Danny Sturgow, which means hopefully you see a little bit more Anthony Smith. Hopefully you see a little bit more Jackson Howard. And Jackson Howard could actually play behind Danny Sturgow as well. I think that's actually where he might be to start off this year, playing behind Danny Sturgow, and then Anthony Smith is playing behind Jaw Joyner. Sorry, I mixed that up a little bit right there. But regardless, I think all 4 of those guys are going to get a ton of reps this year. And Jackson Howard's going to show why he was the best player in the state of Minnesota as a high school recruit of 2023. And he might show why LSU probably should have done more to keep him on hand and get him more minutes. But LSU is a talent factory as well. So Jackson Howard, happy to have him back. I think he has a breakout season, or he's a player who gets more. He's my guy. One of my guys, a player that gets more time this upcoming season and can work into being the guy, a top starter in 2025. Now, I've got 3 more names for you, 2 more on offense, 1 more on defense. The next one on offense I want to talk about is Kenrick Lanier. Now, I've been talking about him for the last year and a half now, it seems. Early spring last year, I was impressed by him. Heading into fall camp, impressed by him even more. Coach Fleck seemed to talk about him nonstop and talked about how he's grasping things, and he was really impressive for a true freshman. And when you saw him last year, we saw him running with the 2s a lot, and then you get into the spring sessions this year, he runs with the 1s a lot, especially with Daniel Jackson not on the field. I think he's going to put his name into the conversation to be one of those next guys to step up, because Daniel Jackson's leaving this year. Elijah Spencer's leaving this year. They don't have eligibility left, and Lemeke Brockington will be back for one final season. I think Kenrick Lanier finds some time, finds some reps, finds some opportunities this year, and then he moves into a full-time starter in 2025. Now, 1 more on each side of the ball. We'll go to defense first, and that's Tyler Stolsky. Tyler Stolsky, walk-on player. I believe he earned a scholarship this offseason, but I can't officially say for sure. Tyler Stolsky made 21 of his 25 tackles last year in 3 games where he got his first opportunity. 7 versus Purdue, 8 versus Ohio State, 6 versus Bowling Green. Now, these were opportunities where other players went down to injury. Cody Lindenberg was hurt. Maverick Bernowski was hurt. The linebacker room was torn to shreds. But Tyler Stolsky came in and he gave us some consistent minutes. He also had a sack in the bowl game, and I think he continues to build off that, because as the game slows down, after you get that feel for in-game experience, things start to tick up. I don't think he's going to be a starter on the team this year. I think that's definitely Lindenberg and Maverick Baranowski, but I think he can find himself in that rotation of linebackers where he gets some opportunities here and there and rotates in. So I think when he does that, he'll get some feel, he'll get some opportunities. Now, if Cody Lindenberg leaves for the NFL, maybe that's an opportunity for him to step up next year and be a starter type player or be a heavily rotated linebacker. But I think Stolsky's in for a big season. And then finally, my last player, Philip Daniels. I would not be surprised if he wins the right tackle battle against Martez Lewis and Aluma Nikeli coming in as a transfer. I think Philip Daniels is teed up to be a starter for this Gophers team. And if it's not in 2024, it's going to be in 2025. I think he's going to find himself, if he doesn't get that starter position against Martez Lewis and Aluma, I think overall that he ends up playing a role similar to what we saw Greg Johnson do last year, where he might not start, but he'll find a way on the field. He'll find his way into that sixth extra offensive lineman for some packages, and he will be a guy who gets some opportunity and in-game experience because he will likely be a starter in 2025. So those are my 6 my guys. Again, that's Pierce Walsh, Kenrick Lanier, and Philip Daniels on the offensive side, Zaquan Bryan, Jackson Howard, and Tyler Stolsky on the defensive side. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know who your guys are in the comments below. But I look forward to the Gopher season coming up, and we'll be sure to talk more football as it keeps on approaching here at Locked On Golden Gophers. That's going to do it for us on today's show. Thank you so much again for listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, and be sure to leave comments. Be sure to talk to others in the comments below. But most of all, we're going to row the boat. Ski-U-Mah, go Gophers, as always. And oh yeah, please do not forget to hit subscribe.